I was able to hear the other opening statements. I was just having a hard time connecting myself. All right, so
I know the feeling, Mr. Zuckerberg.
Democrats often say that we don't remove enough content, and Republicans often say we remove too much. I expect that we'll hear some of those criticisms today. And the fact that both sides criticize us doesn't mean that we're getting this right. But it does mean that there are real disagreements about where the limits of online speech should be. And I think that's understandable. People can reasonably disagree about where to draw the lines. That's a hallmark of democratic societies, especially here in the US with our strong First Amendment tradition. Right now, the discussion is focused on Section 230. Some say that ending 230 would solve all of the internet's problems. Others say that it would end the internet as we know it. From our perspective, Section 230 does two basic things. First, it encourages free expression, which is fundamentally important. Without 230, platforms could potentially be held liable for everything that people say. They'd face much greater pressure to take down more content to avoid legal risk. Second, it allows platforms to moderate content. Without 230, platforms could face liability for basic moderation, like removing harassment that impacts the safety of their communities. Now, there's a reason why America leads in technology. Section 230 helped create the internet as we know it. It has helped new ideas get built and our companies to spread American values around the world, and we should maintain this advantage. But the internet has also evolved, and I think that Congress should update the law to make sure that it's working as intended. One important place to start would be making content moderation systems more transparent. Another would be to separate good actors from bad actors by making sure that companies can't hide behind Section 230 to avoid responsibility for intentionally facilitating illegal activity on their platforms. Now, although this hearing is about content policy, I also want to cover our election preparedness work. Voting ends in 6 days. We're in the midst of a pandemic, and there are ongoing threats to the integrity of this election. Since 2016, Facebook has made major investments to stop foreign interference. We've hired more than 35,000 people to work on safety and security. We've disrupted more than 100 networks coming from Russia, Iran, and China, and more that were misleading people about who they are and what they're doing, including 3 just this week. This is an extraordinary election, and we've updated our policies to reflect that. We're showing people reliable information about voting and results, and we've strengthened our ads and misinformation policies. We're also running the largest voting information campaign in US history. We estimate that we've helped more than 4.4 million people register to vote, and 100,000 people volunteer to be poll workers. Candidates on both sides continue to use our platforms to reach voters. Now, people are rightly focused on the role that technology companies play in our elections. I'm proud of the work that we've done to support our democracy. This is a difficult period, but I believe that America will emerge stronger than ever, and we're focused on doing our part to help.
Mr. Zuckerberg, do you believe that the your platform has a responsibility to off-ramp users who are on the path to radicalization by violent extremist groups?
Senator, thanks for the question. I think this is very important, and my understanding is that we actually do a little of what you're talking about here. If people are searching for, I think, for example, white supremacist organizations, of which we ban those, we treat them as terrorist organizations. Not only are we not going to show that content, but I think we try to, where we can, highlight information that would be helpful, and I think we try to work with experts on that. I can follow up and get you more information on the scope of those activities and when we invoke that. But I certainly agree with the spirit of the question that this is a good idea and something that we should continue pursuing and perhaps expand.
Could you tell me specifically how many threats that you have proactively referred to local or state law enforcement prior to being approached for a preservation request?
Senator, I don't know the number off the top of my head, so I can follow up with you on that. But it is increasingly common that our systems are able to detect when there's potential issues. And over the last 4 years in particular, we've built closer partnerships with law enforcement and the intelligence community to be able to share those kind of signals. So we're doing more of that, including in the case that you mentioned before around the attempted kidnapping of Governor Whitmer. We identified that as a signal to the FBI. I think it was about 6 months ago when we started seeing some suspicious activity on our platform, and there's certainly that's part of our routine and how we operate.
Do any of you have any content moderators who are conservatives?
Senator, we don't ask for their ideology, but just statistically, there are 35,000 of them in cities and places all across the country and world. So I would imagine yes.
Is the First Amendment a given right, or is that a competing equity?
Expression. I believe strongly in free expression. Sorry if I was on mute there. But I do think that, like all equities, it is balanced against other equities like safety and privacy. And even the people who believe in the strongest possible interpretation of the First Amendment still believe that there should be some limits on speech when it could cause imminent risk of physical harm. The kind of famous example that's used is that you can't shout fire in a crowded theater. So I think that getting those equities and the balance right is the challenge that we face.
Do you require Facebook employees to review the content of each of the political ads that you sell in order to ensure that they comply with the law and your own internal rules?
Senator, we require all political advertisers to be verified before they could run ads. And I believe we do review advertising as well.
But does a real person actually read the political ads that you sell, yes or no?
Senator, I imagine that a person does not look at every single ad. Our systems are a combination of artificial intelligence systems and people. We have 35,000 people who do content and security review for us, but doing the massive amount of...
I really just had a straightforward question because I don't think they do. I think the algorithms hit in because I think the ads instantly are placed. Is that correct?
Senator, my understanding of the way the system works is we have computers and artificial intelligence scan everything. And if we think that there are potential violations, then either the AI system will act or it will flag it to the tens of thousands of people who do content review. But
just with all the money you have, you could have a real person review like a lot of the other traditional media organizations do. So one of your researchers warned senior executives that our algorithms exploit the human brain's attraction to divisiveness. The way I look at it, more divisiveness, more time on the platform, more time on the platform, the company makes more money. Does that bother you, what it's done to our politics?
Senator, I respectfully disagree with that characterization of how the systems work. We design our systems to show people the content that's going to be the most meaningful to them, which is not trying to be as divisive as possible. Most of the content on the systems is not political. It's things like making sure that you can see when your cousin had her baby, or
okay. I'm gonna move on to Google here and Mr. Pichai, but I'm telling you right now that that's not what I'm talking about. The cousins and the babies here. I'm talking about conspiracy theories and all the things that I think us, the senators on both sides of the aisle, know what I'm talking about, and I think it's been corrosive.
I would ask this of each of the three of you. Are the Democrats correct that you all are the legitimate referees over our political speech? Mr. Zuckerberg, are you the ref?
Senator, I certainly think not, and I do not want us to have that role.
Do you agree that users should be entitled to due process and an explanation when content they post has been taken down? Mr. Zuckerberg.
Senator, I think that would be a good principle to have.
Would you commit to provide, for the record, a complete list of newspaper articles that Facebook suppressed or limited the distribution of over the past 5 years, along with an explanation of why each article was suppressed or the distribution was limited?
Senator, I can certainly follow up with you and your team to discuss that. This was we have an independent fact-checking program, as you're saying. We try not to be arbiters of what is true ourselves, but we have partnered with fact checkers around the world to help assess that, to prevent misinformation and viral hoaxes from becoming widely distributed on our platform. And I believe that the information that they fact check and the content that they fact check is public. So I think that there's probably already a record of this that can be reviewed.
Mr. Zuckerberg, can you commit that if the president goes on Facebook and encourages violence after election results are announced, that you will make sure your company's algorithms don't spread that content and you will immediately remove those messages?
Senator, yes. Incitement of violence is against our policy, and there are not exceptions to that, including for politicians.
There are exceptions, did you say?
There are not exceptions.
There are no exceptions, which is very important, because obviously there could be messages that are sent that could throw our democracy into chaos, and a lot of it can be and will be created if social media sites do not police what the president says. Mr. Zuckerberg, if President Trump shares Russian or Iranian disinformation, lying about the outcome of the election, can you commit that you will make sure your algorithms do not amplify that content and that you will immediately take that content down?
Senator, we have a policy in place that prevents any candidate or campaign from prematurely declaring victory or trying to delegitimize the result of the election. And what we will do in that case is we will append some factual information to any post that is trying to do that. So if someone says that they won the election when a result isn't in, for example, we will append a piece of information to that saying that official election results are not in yet. So that way, anyone who sees that post will see that context in line. And also, if one of the candidates tries to prematurely declare victory or cite an incorrect result, we have a precaution that we've built in to put at the top of the Facebook app for everyone who signs in the US information about the accurate US election voting results. I think that this is a very important issue to make sure that people can get accurate information about the results of the election.
Mr. Zuckerberg, if President Trump uses his Facebook account to call for armed private citizens to patrol the polls on election day, which would constitute illegal voter intimidation and violation of the Voting Rights Act, will you commit that your algorithms will not spread that content and that you will immediately take that content down?
Senator, my understanding is that content like what you're saying would violate our voter suppression policies and would come down.
Mr. Zuckerberg and Dorsey, who censored the New York Post stories or throttled them back, do either one of you have any evidence that the New York Post story is part of Russian disinformation, or that those emails aren't authentic? Do any of you have any information whatsoever they're not authentic or that they are Russian disinformation? Mr. Zuckerberg?
Senator, as I testified before, we relied heavily on the FBI's intelligence and alerts to us, both through their public testimony and private briefings and alerts they gave us.
Did the FBI contact you and say the New York Post story was false?
Senator, not about that story specifically.
Why did you throttle it back?
General.
Why did you throttle it back?
They alerted us to be on heightened alert around a risk of hack and leak operations around a released trove of information. And Senator, to be clear on this, we didn't censor the content. We flagged it for fact checkers to review, and pending that review, we temporarily constrained its distribution to make sure that it didn't spread wildly while it was being reviewed. But it's not up to us either to determine whether it's Russian interference nor whether it's true. We rely on
It's
the
up to you.
FBI and intelligence and fact checkers to do
Fine.
that.
The alleged plot to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer and the potential for intimidation or even violence at voting locations show that the proliferation of the threat of violence on Facebook remains a very real and urgent problem. Mr. Zuckerberg, in light of the operational mistake around Kenosha, what steps has Facebook taken to ensure that your platform is not being used to promote more of this type of violence?
Thank you, Senator. This is a big area of concern for me personally and for the company. We've strengthened our policies to prohibit any militarized social movement. So any kind of militia like this. We've also banned conspiracy networks. So QAnon being the largest example of that. That is completely prohibited on Facebook at this point, which, you know, in this period where I'm personally worried about the potential of increased civil unrest, making sure that those groups can't organize on Facebook may cut off some legitimate uses, but I think that they will also preclude greater potential for organizing any harm. And by making the policy simpler, we will also make it so that there are fewer mistakes in content moderation. So I feel like we're in a much stronger place on the policies on this at this point.